We know from statistics that investors that are active as board members will create better returns on exits than if they are not. And so today we're going to talk about boards of directors.
Who's that handsome guy on the right-hand side of that first slide?
Well, that would be me at a Tech Coast Angels event. And I happen to wear a hat a lot. Now, people who've watched this podcast don't know that, but you'll recognize me from my hat anywhere else.
I thought it was Frank Sinatra for a quick second.
Ah, gee, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have four things to cover today, really fast: best practices, warnings and pitfalls, board relationships, and advice for board members. Quite a bit. But here are four sets of stats because, as we've talked about in the past, we want to be data driven. 72% of startups that fail cite leadership and governance issues as the key factor. Let that one sink in. 3 times more likely to raise follow-up funding when a strong independent board is in place. 5 to 7 is the ideal board size. We'll really delve into that. And what's the cost of a great board advice? You see the zero versus what you would pay for a consultant. So why wouldn't you want a great board? That board gives your company credibility and accountability and strategic firepower and a safety net. What more can I say to convince you to have a good board? Well, let's talk about how that board is put together. The first thing is look on the right-hand side before the left. The ideal mix is the founder and CEO, founder or CEO, usually is the most important board member because that vision that that person provides is the driver behind everything. The board really has to provide resources to make that vision happen. Then there needs to be an industry veteran, the person that's seen the movie before. There needs to be a finance expert because it always comes down to whether the company is able to raise the funds, preserve the funds, spend them correctly, and be efficient. And then there should be somebody who has experience in operating and scaling a company because that's difficult. And young entrepreneurs often have never had that. And then finally, no matter how these play out, you need somebody who's independent. In other words, if you were to have a board of 2 founders and 2 investors, you better have them pick an independent voice that can, separate them when there is a problem, put them together when there isn't, and make sure that there is a 5th person for a 3rd vote when there is. So now we look over for how we do that. Go to your left-hand side. We want to seek true independence. We want skill, but not necessarily loyalty. It has to be loyalty to the corporation, not to the individuals or to the investors. Diversity is only a feature, a way in which this board will work together. Diversity in experience, defining the terms and the tenure is important. I don't think there should ever be permanent board members, not even the founder. So 2 to 3 year terms, annual terms are often put into the bylaws, and that's okay. But I would rather make 2 to 3 year staggered terms that have a cliff turnover. In other words, people are going to expect to go off that board. And if they're reelected because they perform well, that's good, but not because they're sitting in a seat and have to have that seat forever. And then finally, we want to know whether we have an advisory board, which we should have, or a governance board, which is the one that takes the responsibility for seeing that that corporation endures, well, we'll say forever. So formal cores do have a fiduciary duty, lots of them, and we're going to know the difference when we talk about this today. Okay, so I've got 8 things to say about running a great board meeting, and these are important. The first one is, how often do you do this? If you're a young company, it's going to be monthly. Once you've hit break even, quarterly is just fine. And everybody knows that when there are emergencies or you're about to do a financing round, ad hoc meetings just happen to happen, not just for crises, but for special events. If you're getting close to an M&A, I'm in a board right now that's been meeting weekly, and it just is going to happen. Number 2 is CEOs, please send your board packs in advance. I often get them an hour before the board meeting. There's no way to read, absorb, and be ready to speak about. So distribute them 5 to 7 days early. The meeting time is for discussions, not for reading. And number 3, use a consistent agenda so we know what to expect, like the update followed by the financials, followed by incentives or initiatives, followed by risks, decisions. Whatever you're going to do, let us kind of believe we know how the look of a board meeting will progress. Number 4 is the time box that is required for every section of a board meeting is important, because if we start to run way over on discussing something, the chairman has a chance to say, "Hey, we're over on this one. Let's zip it until the next meeting. Let's zip it until we have a separate meeting." But otherwise, these meetings are ad hoc by accident, and we don't want that. Number 5 is include an executive session where the CEO is not present. I know this hurts to hear if you're the CEO, but you want the board members to have no reticence in talking about the performance of the CEO or something they want to talk about the composition of the executive team or anything else, where they, as a board, with loyalty to the company, not necessarily the CEO, feel like they're free to talk. Number 6, record proper minutes. When you are in a legal problem, the other side is going to ask for a lot of things, one of which is all of the minutes. And if they have been recorded properly, you are protecting yourself in many ways. You don't want to record, unless you're a nonprofit, every single thing that happened at all. You want to be very, very careful not to do that. But you don't want to talk about anything where there's a major decision and a vote. You must have that. And by the way, if you issue a stock option to the most lowly employee, you still need to have that single option approved by the board. I don't know if many people knew that. You can promise an option subject to the board's approval, but you can't give an option. That's a big one. Number 7, measure the effectiveness of the board, 360s. Annual self-assessment. You assess the other board members. You assess yourself. You assess the CEO. And number 8, celebrate and acknowledge. There is nothing more powerful than great celebration, even if it is, "That a boy, John, that was a great job." Or, "Jane, that was a great comment. Thank you." Whatever you say, celebration always works, no matter what. Okay, so red slide, red flags. Boards that damage company share predictability and warning signs. Let's know what they are. I've got 6 of them. Number 1, boards that rubber stamp the CEO. You've heard of it. I've been in it. I hate it. I sometimes just try and be the black hat just to be able to say anything that stirs up a board. Number 2 is information asymmetry. That sounds a little strange, but this is when the CEOs control all the information and they delve it out when they want, how they want, and the poor board is just a victim. Or number 3, skipped meetings and disengagement. Throw that person out. Vote that person off the board. Yes, the person was voted on the board by the shareholders, but you can still vote that person off until the next meeting and let that person run again if they're going to. And then number 4, conflicted directors. Sometimes venture capitalists will prevent an exit. Sometimes they'll force an exit. Sometimes they'll force a round in which the founders are heavily diluted when the company didn't really need the money. Conflicted directors, watch it. Number 5, overreaching directors. I hate to hear this, but we have had times when bullies have been put on the board and they have dominated board meetings and kept people from being able to talk. Or directors that say, "I am going to talk to the vice president of sales because they're not doing a good job," which just cuts off the CEO at the knees. I have a statement that I learned back in 1996 that I haven't forgotten yet. Noses in, fingers out. Think of that one for a second. You maybe want to ask a question of that vice president, but you never want to tell that vice president what to do, ever. Or you want to have the CEO with you and discuss it with the CEO, but never otherwise. I'll get back to you as a great way of solving that problem. Number 6, if you have no succession plan, here is the heavy one for you, David. Out of all the boards I've been on, and I think I've told you I stopped counting at 15 years ago, 4 of my CEOs have died in office. 4 of them. And without a succession plan, one company was beautiful. It had a succession plan. The chairman stepped in and ran the company beautifully, and we sold the company, and it was great. One of them, the CEO, was exercising in his bedroom and fell over dead. And there was no succession plan. So what did they do? They took a salesperson, elevated him to to CEO, and the company did not survive. There's another where I took over and ran the company and really took it from 26 employees down to only several, but it had to. The company had to be done, and the CEO would not do it. And then the fourth one was kind of sad, and I'm not going to talk about it. But 4 times have I made the case: succession plan, succession plan, succession plan. How should the CEO handle their boards? Good question. So I have do's and don'ts. First of all, be transparent, radically transparent. Share bad news fast, because that's the best way to maintain credibility with your board. Build one-on-one relationships with each director. I have had CEOs call me once a week for a 10-minute little something just to do a mind dump or ask questions. Build those one-on-one relationships. When there is a problem, they will come back to help, especially in an M&A event where all the people have to be on the same page. Number 3 is come prepared with clear decisions needed. In other words, if I'm the CEO and I'm running out of cash, I want you to know it right away, early. I want to know why. And I want to know what you plan to do about it. Or do you want the board to help you? Of course. Number 4 is use the board's expertise between meetings. There usually is a lead director or a CEO coach, same person. And that person is the one to get the first call, if not the chairman, if not both. And sometimes it is call everybody on the board and find out. I have a great CEO from a company that we exited just last year, late last year, that did that constantly and was able to inform us of things that happened and ask us individually before the board meeting, so that when we had the board meeting, we could really be on the same page to discuss issues. And then set expectations on communication norms. Set them early so we know when we're going to hear from you. And finally, on the do, ask for honest feedback and then act on it. Or if you're not going to act on it, tell us why. You can push back. There's no reason not to. You're the one that handles all of those things about the vision. So tell us. Now let's go to the bad side. This is what not to do. Don't ever surprise the board. Don't ever manage the board like a PR audience. Don't ever bring problems to the board without a proposed solution. How about that? And sometimes if you don't have one, admit it, and admit it early. Don't treat your board members as a reporting session. I have been railing against this in board meetings, let alone outside of board meetings, forever. Never cherry pick information just to look good, because the board will see through that. I have one great story of a board that had met after $8 million of venture capital and $6 million of money from angels. That's 14 million. It ran out of money, but they never told us until they had run out of money. And the things that happened after that are not nice. And then finally, don't ignore pushbacks or dismiss dissenting voices, because they're there for a reason. Some of you know about DeBono's 6 hats, where you can do this as an exercise. You have 6 different colored hats, not really hats. You talk about them as hats. And you pass around a hat with a slip of paper in each, and people pick up a piece of paper that has a color on it. And it tells them what role they are to play in this discussion. The white hat says, it's going to be good no matter what. And the black hat says, this won't work no matter what. And the other colors are the ones that add color to all of this. It's a great exercise, but don't ignore pushback. You really have to hear all the issues before you make a decision that's tough. So what is the rhythm of communications? And this kind of answers what you had started to talk about a while ago, but let's do this fast. Weekly, brief emails to the full board, tiny read. This is where the outreach, they can be emails or they can be phone calls, as I mentioned a minute ago. I want to have key metrics. I want a dashboard and have it sent to the board automatically. You, as a CEO, better have your key metrics. I'm thinking of OKRs. I'm thinking about ways in which I can measure how well the company is doing and be able to measure it constantly based upon the same strategic or even tactical items that I'm measuring it against. Data-driven. How often have you and I talked about that, David? Flag any emerging issues early. That's just a weekly reminder. And then monthly, how about the written CEO update if there isn't a board meeting? How about the financial snapshot versus the budget? If you don't do that monthly yourself, shame on you. But if you don't do it for the board, shame on you and the board. And then finally, tell us about key hires and departures and decisions. If you have lost some of the institutional memory, we as the board ought to hear about that and what you're doing about it. And key decisions that you've made, even if it doesn't require us to check in, it's going to be important because someday those decisions will come back to bite you if you don't. Quarterly, full board meetings. This is after break even. And by the way, board meetings, it says 2 to 4 hours. And I said that, I had to think about that. A 2-hour board meeting, especially online, is all you're going to get. Beyond that, you're going to have people drifting off. I don't mean to sleep. I just mean drifting off, thinking about other things. If it's a live board meeting, you can make it go for 4 hours with a break, but I would rather have a good 2-hour board meeting with a great agenda. Quarterly, the OKR reviews that I just talked about, the strategy reviews. We want to know how you're doing, and that just reinforces getting earlier news. I talked number 3 about the risk register. I've spoken about this before, and I just want to mention it again. Every company should have one. It could be a spreadsheet. I want to know what the risks are, and they can be risks for OSHA. They can be risks for software development. They can be risks for insurance policies. They can be risks for key employees leaving. Whatever those risks are, there's a register that you should keep that says the board ought to hear what these possible risks could be and whether or not anything is happening about them that might be mitigated. And then finally, any kind of audit committee or finance committee meetings and reports. Those are for larger boards and later boards. And finally, once a year, answering your question, a board self-assessment, 360s in every direction. You review yourself, you review the CEO, and maybe even other board members. The compensation review is necessary because the CEO's compensation is actually subject to the board's approval. The CEO can't do it for him or herself. Director term renewal decisions. I said director terms should be overlapping and they should be staggered. And finally, David, here it is, the strategic planning session. I recommend one a year, and I recommend on site. And I recommend directors who are out of state or city flying or driving in and having a dinner before the meeting. It's the best way to do something informally without talking much about business. Bring some executives along. So you've got the CEO, you've got the vice president of sales, vice president of development, and others. But it is an important once a year, and it's an obligation of the board. Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
So I'm going to give advice for board members and advice checklist for the board and the entrepreneurs. Quickly, the advice. Know their fiduciary duty. There are several duties. Duty of care. Oh boy, how many times have I talked about this? Care of the care for the corporation, not for you or your shareholders. Loyalty, same thing. Loyalty to the corporation. I'm going to add one that I hadn't added very often, and this is the duty of obedience. Obedience. Wow. This is obedience to the mission of the corporation, obedience to the bylaws, the things that are the legal documents. I hadn't talked about that often before, but it's important. Number 2 is prepare before every board meeting. A board member shouldn't just show up. That's a very bad thing to do. It doesn't add much value, and you're ad hoc. And some of the times, these are the people that talk the longest and the most. Number 3 is ask questions. Don't lecture. I've had the lecture problem with too many board members over the year. But it's great when you ask questions that brings the whole board together to answer them. Number 4 is support the CEO, but challenge the plan. So this isn't bad for a board to say, wait a minute, here's something that will run out of money if we don't do something about it. Or you're churning too much and you're not addressing that at all. So what's the deal here? Or whatever your questions are, you're asking questions and you're challenging the plan, but you're supporting the CEO in trying to find ways of solving the problem. Number 5 is disclose conflicts immediately. Now that's for the CEOs, not a problem, But boy, for many of the board members who are in 7 or 8 boards, I told you how many I've been in, or for the VCs that have invested in many, those are such important issues. Disclose those conflicts right away and isolate yourself whenever there's a conflict, because you don't want to be accused as a board member by a shareholder, let alone by the CEO, let alone by another board member. And lastly, be available between meetings, because great board members are reachable rather than just available only during the several hours of a board meeting. All right, so let's do a healthy checklist. First of all, the board has a written charter and bylaws. I mean, that's required of a corporation, but the board better know what it says, especially about the bylaws. Number 2, the board has at least 1 independent director. We said 2, 2, and 1, or something that gives an independent a chance to be elected by the consensus of the board. Number 3 is all directors have signed conflict of interest documents. That means that I have acknowledged that fact that is necessary. Next is board packs are sent 5 or plus days before meetings. Remember, this is a checklist, and we have covered these things. They may sound redundant, but it is a checklist. And then finally, meeting minutes recorded and archived. I know many times now that they're digital, I would propose that they all go into a data room, electronic data room, so that they're available for people who are needing for legal reasons or for M&A or for anything, raising funds, to get to the board minutes as one of the things that they have to see. Number 5, the CEO provides regular written updates. I've covered how often and all, and if you remember that or go back and listen to that portion again, it's important. Number 6 is annual board self-evaluations. Number 7, succession plan documentation for the CEO role. I told those stories about the 4. I hope I made my case. D&O insurance is current and adequate. I've told you before, David, I won't serve on a board without D&O insurance. I've been sued 5 times over all these many boards, and I won 4 of them and had to settle a 5th because they also sued my wife and my family trust. Not that they would have won, but I was told by my attorney that it would cost another $250,000 just to get in front of the judge to get my wife off. Well, it was easy to settle when I heard that. And finally, the compensation committee decisions are documented because, again, the board is the one to compensate the CEO. Now, sometimes the board also has a say in compensation for one level below, but that is optional. And so for that, David, I have pretty much finished, except perhaps key takeaways. And there are 6 of those. Build your board for skills and independence, not your own comfort. Have no surprises, radical transparency. Structure your meeting pack early and document it always. Rubber stamp the boards and the overreaching directors. They're both equally dangerous, so whichever you do is bad. Board members prepare, disclose, and govern and stay available. And to end the whole presentation, audit your governance quarterly. Most companies don't, and it shows. And the governance is an important part of the operation of a company, and certainly additive, not subtractive. Whew. David, that's it.
I have one question for you. When a startup, how do you compensate the board members?
Okay, so I created this plan in 1996 and just kept repeating it. And then I started hearing it repeated back to me, and I knew that it was getting across. And so it's become kind of an industry standard, if I can say that, but it was by accident. Number 1, if you're a VC and are paid by your venture capital or private equity company, you are not compensated for any board service at all, and rarely compensated even for travel, although that's optional. Number 2, if you are an outside board member and you're highly valued because you are the skilled person in your industry, you may be able to get more than Number 3, the average unpaid board member. So let's address that one first. The average unpaid board member would be an angel investor or somebody who has put money into the company, or it might be one of the executives. Either way, the executives are paid in their own sense, their own option plan, their own salary. They are not paid as board members. That leaves only one group, and that is the unpaid investor, the
Right.
angel investor typically. And that is a 1% with a 2 to 4 year vesting period. And it usually turns out to be 2, although it can be 4, and no cliff. And so if you've served for 2 months and for any reason you have to leave, you get 2/24 of your vested amount of 1% of the fully diluted equity of the company.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you're diluted along with the CEO, along with everybody else when new money is raised. So be aware this is not a non-dilution agreement. So this is the only thing to talk about, the 5th board member. Let's say that we get the star of the industry, the one that can bring in money, the one that can bring in talent, the one that can bring in sales. That person might be compensated at 2 or 3%, sometimes even more, without shame, because that board member is going to be dealing with the CEO many more times than the other board members will, and with many more positive effects. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I think this is great. I mean, I think without a good board, you're going to struggle as a company. I think to all of our other discussions in the past, the board is a necessary, not sufficient condition for success. A bad board is a necessary and sufficient reason for failure, though, in my mind. You can really have an obstreperous board, one that is not integrated. And I think, to your point, they become very dangerous. And so getting the right board, getting the right battle rhythm with the board in terms of the communication, their expectation is really critical. So you can close it off. And
I've written a book called Building Great Boards. It's available on Amazon as Kindle or soft, and it's very cheap. I think I priced it at $3.99. I can't remember, but it was priced very cheap because I wanted a lot of people to read it. So
Good.
there is a pitch for something where I make nothing at the same time as it gives real information. Okay, David, if I have to finish it, let me say to everybody, this has to be one of our more important presentations. It's because of the importance of a board in any corporation of any size, any company of any size.